We'll go ahead and get the class started. Looks like somebody else coming in here. And then, okay. So you guys see that okay? Glasses. Should be a picture of an elephant with, no, I'm just kidding. So as you guys know, one of our key tenets is that you're doing your calls and whatnot, your 10-4, right? So who wants to kick us off with your with what you've been doing this week here? Or I can just go around my screen. Let's start with Julie. How are you doing on your calls? The questions you're asked every day.
Yeah. So today I've actually, I didn't call any of my leads or that. What I did is I called a home inspector, and I'm going to meet with him on Friday, and trying to expand my network of go-to people, and another lender and a title company. So I've got all those meetings on Friday. Mm-hmm. And then this morning I did go out to the Humane Society, and I'm going to partner up and do Adopt a Pet.
Oh, right on.
Kind of build my brand and help them out too.
That's a great idea.
So,
nice.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. So.
Oh, that's cool. Nice. How about Miriam? What do you got for us today?
Hi. So I have one lead actually from my daughter's school. This other mom, she mentioned to me that her and her husband are looking to get ready to purchase a home, and I shared with her the information for a lender that I met through actually one of the KW events that they did for Halloween, and I have an appointment with the loan officer tomorrow morning, so that he can kind of explain to me a bit more about how he works and what his process is like.
Great, nice. Awesome. How about Courtney? What do you got?
I was working on filling out my database, and I wrote my holiday card this morning while I was waiting on a call back from an attorney related to my transaction. I talked to a listing agent for a property that just went live this morning, and he priced it really aggressively in Beaverton, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch. And he said he'd already received 20 requests for showings. So it doesn't feel like the best fallback option for my client, because there are so many people interested in the property, but it was nice to talk to someone else. And it reminded me to update my greeting on my voicemail so that it reflects my profession instead of it just being, hey, it's Courtney, leave me a message. So I did that. And that might be mostly it right now. Talk to my client, some other things too. So
nice. Good job. And that's a good reminder. When I've been reaching out to some of my coaching agents, I was actually surprised that the vast majority of them, when I first called, like their voicemails either didn't even have a greeting at all, were just like the computerized, answer, or it was just such a generic greeting that it was like, wow, at the very least, have your name, right? Say you've reached Eric Bjorga, so that somebody knows. And if you're a professional in this now, and if you're juggling other businesses or other work, totally fine, but just at least you would want to have your name on there and just a simple greeting. That's fine. I totally get it. If you're all in on this though, for sure, there's no reason not to have your greeting. And if you guys aren't sure what to say or whatever, certainly reach out to me or anybody that you feel comfortable with. I'm happy to speak to it. My marketing background, and we can come up with a good greeting that you feel good with. So anyway, that's just a quick aside. Thanks for the reminder, Courtney. Deanna, what do we got for you?
I didn't add any to my database. I am trying to get more information to fill in for like emails and addresses and stuff like that. Because I have like some phone numbers, some addresses, some emails. And so I'm trying to get it all in there. And then I did put a list together of different people like that do roofing for inspections and flooring and all the different things that like we've done in our house, the people that I like to work with, or, and trying to put that together for clients so that they have people to go to if needed. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. How many of you have done something even remotely like that? Just like quick show of hands, anybody? No, one person, good. Well, one of the best ways for us to connect with people that we know or don't know super well, but would like to be in better relationship with, is to provide value, right? In our industry, we're not trying to just sell stuff. We actually are, if we provide value to people, they will want to be in relationship. We can stay in their life, right? So that's a really easy thing. It doesn't have to be like, the top 5 whatever roofers in the state. It's somebody that, and if you're not even sure, just borrow other people's lists. Honestly, just come up with a few things, and if you have time, which some of you have right now, spend some time call these people and just learn a little bit. Say, hey, I'm interested to know more about your business because I need a good roofer to refer to, or a good whatever, and just want to hear a little bit more about your business. Gives you kind of practice on the phone, and you're coming from a position of where they want your business, so it kind of flips it, so you can feel like you're controlling the conversation a little more, and you can vet some of those people just as practice on the phone, really. But yeah, I encourage you guys, put together a list. Don't think of it as a big giant crazy hard task. That's actually one of the easier things you can do to provide value to your clients. Just be of value, right? Thornton, what do you got for us today? Oh man, you're muted here. Did I mute you, or did you mute yourself?
Oh, no, I did that. I went and viewed a house with a buyer of mine. They're looking to move out of their existing home here in town, and actually out in the country, move into town because of the kids and schools. So that was cool. I helped him buy one investment home already, but it was nice to go look at an actual home for him and his family. So that was different. And I thank you for bringing up the voicemail thing. I'll take you up on your offer for 5 minutes of your time, because I just got a new phone, so I need to get my voicemail going. So thanks for the reminder there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and I'm just waiting on my first closing to happen, hopefully in 2 days. So it'd be nice to have that wrapped up. So
good.
Okay. Yay.
Vanessa, what do you got for us?
I am like crazy sick right now. So I've been doing too much. One of my leads finally got back to me yesterday, so I connected her up with the lender I'm working with. And then I made like only 2 contacts.
Okay.
That's it.
I just put my information in the chat for you guys. Nicole, how about you? What you got for us?
So I hate phone calls, but I did it, and it turned out pretty well.
Good.
I just called a bunch of people that I had added to my contacts back in June and July when I was working with a nonprofit organization. I was on the board. There was a little bit of a cringy falling out from some icky stuff that had happened. So I wanted to give it a little while so there wasn't like social drama around it. Made some phone calls and reconnected with some people, which is really good. I didn't really get any leads from there, but I did get home addresses for Christmas cards. And then I did a couple Facebook posts that were and got a lot of engagement. I got a lot of private messages with people's contact information. And I scheduled a open house this weekend, and took a couple that I've been working with to go look at a house yesterday. I'm working with a couple of first-time buyers that are pretty limited income, and so we're doing that. We're hunting we're like snake hunting. There's no such thing as the house they're looking for, but we're gonna find it as soon as there is. So I've been doing some of the, like, I know you say you don't want a condo, I know you say you don't want a townhouse, but let's go check these ones out and maybe you'll change your mind. And I think that I made some headway there with one of the couples. And I got my my holiday cards ordered and address labels sent over from my the title company that I'm working with, and I got my advertisement postcards shipped out also. So I should be mailing those. I'm going to do them, by hand so that I can sign my name and pen at the bottom of it. And I should be doing those probably Thursday or Friday. They should be in the mail. So, and I added 5 new contacts to my database. None of them are leads, but they're other real estate agents, an interior decorator, and a lender. So
Cool. You got a busy lot of stuff going on there. So let's say by Monday, you're going to get all those things mailed and out, all the things you were just talking about, right? Is that reasonable?
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, the open house I have is only 2 hours on Saturday. And I do have a teenager that's turning 15 and having a sleepover, but I should still be able to get some stuff done. I should still be able to get all that done easy by Monday. So
You put them to work, stuff and
yeah, right. You haven't met my teenagers. There'll be none of that.
Good. Let's see. How about Stella?
Hello, everybody. So this morning I've been busy. I jumped on open house opportunity on this Saturday, and I've been advertising that open house on my social media. And actually, I just realized one of my friends, who's my friend, and she lives in the neighborhood, and she knows like a lot of people. She's friends with 800 people on Facebook, and most of them are actually neighbors. They live in the community, and she shared my post. So I realized, wow, that's great. I sent her right away. And then I realized that I have another friend on Facebook, a neighbor, who also, she has like maybe 500 people. And I'm gonna ask her to share my post on open house too. So I have more exposure in the neighborhood. People will know that I'm in real estate business.
That's good.
So this was my like aha moment today. I didn't think about it, that I can ask these 2 girlfriends to share my posts on open houses, and I will be asking them to do that. And so what else I did? I scheduled my appointment with title company on Tuesday, and I'm meeting them face to face. They will be explaining to me, showing me what they can do for me, how they can assist me with my business. And yeah, that was it for today.
Good job. Little quick opportunity for all you guys on that was something that she was talking about with her social media, sharing that post. A little tip would be to go in and look at who, like wherever she shares it, who else shares it, go in and look in the comments and engage with those people that comment on it. Obviously like their comment and then respond to their comment in some way, find a way to respond to their comment, with a few words, that's just another good way to kind of make those connections and provide like visibility for yourself within that. And Facebook will, because of the algorithms, you'll start showing up for them more also, right? So
that's good tip. Thank you.
Yep. Carly, what you got for us today?
I'm actually getting ready to go on vacation, so I have not been doing a lot. But I did add 5 new contacts, and I'm sending out a bunch of handwritten notes today.
Good job. Good job. Stick with that and make sure you get those notes out. That's an easy one to kind of say you're going to get done. At least, okay, I'll talk to myself. I get started on that, and then somehow the notes don't get out. So I don't know why that is, so make sure you do it. Who else do I got? Trevor?
Yeah, hi. So I just scheduled an open house for this weekend today. Gonna post for advertisements later today and tomorrow on my social media. I haven't really been able to add much to my database. I feel like I've capped myself with everyone I know. I've added like everyone that I possibly could that I know so far. So now I just have to find people that that I can add to my database that I don't really know that maybe I have to reach out to. So that's about it though.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, feel free. Feel free to talk to your coach and whoever about how to do that. There's different ways, there's not only one way, just think of it like, You don't have to be overly salesy, and adding is good, and communicating with people you have is even maybe even a little better. Although right now, of course, depending on where you're at, it's good to keep growing it, but if you're not communicating with them, it really doesn't matter who you have in there, right? So
Yeah.
all right, right on, you guys. Well, let's rock this. My notes over here. So let's get back on our share screen here. And where was I? Okay. Good. I think I've got us dialed in here, and I'm gonna just make sure I've got my screens all set up on. Okay. So yeah, we went through, where we're at on that. Obviously we're, as I've said before, we, as you'll hear it from me a lot. We're here to help you succeed. And, what we really want to do is provide as much value as we can through Ignite, and then really help you feel equipped to run your business. There are a lot of different, aspects we cover in Ignite. Today's is the talk about negotiations, win the deal. What you'll find is that, there's a lot of different things that you do every day that that you obviously, probably don't realize are even you're engaging in negotiations in one way or another. Today we'll look at some specific stuff that we do in our business, and get you thinking about different ways that you could, I guess, think about handling certain situations. What we've got, if you're ready to go, we've talked through the lead generation, which of course is important. The one thing that obviously we're not doing today, but we typically would do, is give you an opportunity to, make some calls. I'll just take a moment to highlight this, because we just talked about it. It's great that you guys are doing these things, and make it a part of your daily habit to, even if it's like, if your goal was like one note card a day. I mean, I don't really, it's got to be whatever you need to succeed in your business. So I just want to encourage you guys, you can do it. Sometimes it seems overwhelming when it's, like a lot of like, oh, you're supposed to do 10 note cards a day or something. That's, I mean, if you got nothing to do and you're sitting around all day, then yeah, get 5 or 10 done. But if you don't, look at if I even end the day with one phone call, if you got a busy day, make that your goal. Make it like one, I'm going to connect with one person a day, just at least one person. And I'm going to connect with at least one person on social media, which would be like a dialogue on, DM or something, right? If you can do that, and be consistent in doing that, you're gonna come out well. So just want to encourage you guys, stay with it. Don't get overwhelmed by big numbers. Don't feel like you've fallen behind. Just do it. And for those that turned in some numbers, great, awesome. So here's the thing about negotiations. It says right here, your ability to negotiate will directly influence your rate of contracts that close. The big thing about negotiations is a mindset. You want to be keeping in mind that like negotiations aren't inherently about winning. They're about bringing two people together, right? So a negotiator, if you think of the word arbitrator or a mediation or those types of words, those are professional services, if you want to call it that try to bring two parties together. And really it's negotiating. So negotiating, I mean, for some of you, you may be super comfortable with that. For others, maybe that seems, kind of just overwhelming or kind of crazy. But I just want to encourage you guys that, it doesn't have to be some crazy, like scary topic. I'm hoping it's not for any of you guys. And it is something that we do often. We negotiate with our kids. We negotiate with our, boyfriend, SO, wife, husband, whatever. We negotiate with people all the time in things we don't even realize we're doing. So it's really wired into us. So if we just get our head wrapped around that and see it as a positive thing, we'll do so much better at creating win-win situations. Really, when you think about the idea of a win-win, what sometimes it trips people up is they think of it in terms of like, in order to win, I have to get everything I wanted. And how do I do that? How is it a win-win if the other person gets everything they wanted? That's not really what it is. It's as you see here, like it's a give and take. It's a process of finding, I can live with this. This is really important to me. This is really important to me. How do we find a way to find common ground? Negotiation is about finding that common ground, and it isn't always in the middle, right? It's finding a point where both people will agree. So maybe because of a situation, a certain party might be in a situation where their negotiation position isn't very strong. So they're at the very least, they're trying to keep the deal together. And so, like for example, in this market, a buyer often has a very low negotiation like power position, but that doesn't mean you can't find areas to work on, try to find common ground with a seller where it maybe is of little or no significance to them, and you can find a win-win basically out of it, given the scenario, given what you're up against. So what we're going to do is I want to show, as it kind of highlights this video, but I do want to show it to you because I think it's a good, like little it's a good mindset kind of, I guess, shift, if you will. Let me do this. I'm going to pull it up real quick. And any questions so far? I can't imagine you guys have any questions on this. Oh, admit somebody just came on. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I just got somebody else jumped in there. Apologize. Okay. Screen. Boy, I'll tell you what, I need like 4 screens right now. I got so many different things on this one. All right. Where did there it is. Oops. Let me do that. And I'm hopeful that this will play and you can hear it. If not, wave your hands at me. Let's see what happens. Do you hear it or no? No. I don't hear it. So if I don't hear it, you don't hear it. Why isn't that working? I wonder how you do that. Well, I don't know. Maybe we don't get to watch it. I don't know why it does that sometimes. Anybody else? Does anybody actually know why sometimes you can hear it and sometimes you can't?
It's done in a few other classes too. And what they ended up doing was sending us the link for it and we watch it individually.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I wonder why that is.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see what I can. Well, darn. I think this guy's thing is pretty cool. I like how he proposed, or what he talks about. And yeah, that's interesting. I played it right before this and it worked fabulously. I wonder if it's the way that Zoom set up that it doesn't work. All right, well, okay, I'll send that to you right now. And okay. So anyway, it is in, whoops, everyone. So if you want to check that or copy and paste that somewhere, that's in the chat. It's only like 2 minutes, pretty quick. What we'll do is, one of the things that, as we go through this, let's see here. seriously, with this class, I need like more than 2 screens. One of the things about negotiations that we want to keep in mind is they are really our, no, cancel. I'm sorry, I've got, seriously cannot figure out how to keep the things that I want on the screen. It's driving me crazy. My computer just keeps moving them around. There, negotiation. I guess that's back up now. We obviously work through, finding leads. We're trying to, in this business, of course, we're trying to get down to the point where we actually have clients and then write a sale agreement or agreement of some sort. And then or accept an agreement if it's our listing. And at some point, in order to actually come to a successful closing, we're going to be negotiating. And I would actually argue that, like I said earlier, we're negotiating at all levels of our life. One of the things that we often are doing on the front end when we first meet with clients is a form of negotiation as we're talking to them about expectations. So setting expectations is, you could think of it almost like negotiations. You're helping them to see and understand what's going on in the market, or whatever it is you're, let's say with a buyer, setting expectations. So how you tee that up gives you the framework to negotiate with them. You'll negotiate with your clients, you'll negotiate with the other agent. I mean, there's in this scenario, in this framework we're talking about today, those are the 2 primary negotiations we're talking about. And both of those go so much better when you've laid a foundation or set expectations. And if you're intentional about that, how you do that, you'll find that, and I've talked about this before, anybody that's heard me talk about setting expectations just gives you, it kind of gives you like a depending on how you want to visualize it, but it gives you sort of a runway, or it gives you like it lays out a potential couple of paths that will allow for you to succeed, basically, because you've already sort of laid a framework for what could be through expectations. So negotiations starting from 0 are a lot harder than negotiations starting from some potential framework through setting expectations. So something to kind of keep in mind as you're, as you're doing that. So do you guys in your, so let's see here, do you have the, where are we at? I want to say we're at page 12, 13. Who does not have their packet around or in front of anybody? Okay, I just wanted to know if I'm following it and nobody has it, then it doesn't really matter if I follow it, but everybody has it. That's good. That's helpful. So, oh yeah, it talks about that right there. So one of the things that, so let's just talk about these tips. Above all, be professional. Well, I guess that goes without, saying, of course, right? I think these are obvious. Your goal assigned contract. Well, we could say that, and then that is a goal at sometimes. Sometimes it's not always about a signed contract, yet that is one of the goals you could, one of the areas of negotiating. Sometimes it's like your area of negotiating is setting up the basically a win-win where you in the end can put the contract together. I just did that today. In fact, over the last couple of days, negotiating for some buyers, I was essentially verbally negotiating with the agent and laying out the groundwork and expectations for my clients, partially because I knew my clients were going to come in low and lower than I advised them to. And I knew that despite my negotiations with them, I couldn't get them as high as I wanted. So I needed to lay the groundwork with this other agent so that when his response and his client's response to the offer, when it actually came across, allowed us to have a more successful dialogue at that point. So, thinking about it, as it says here on page 12, control what you say to anyone involved in the transaction. If you create anxiety in your clients. So one of the things about that is drama, right? If you get all fired up about stuff or get all like, worried, or, oh my gosh, what are they going to, whatever. Oh no, what if they don't take our offer? When you think about negotiating, as it talks about on the page before, it talks about, like I said earlier, often you're negotiating with your clients. So I want to just take a minute to remind you that when you're negotiating with your client, some of what you're doing is you're helping keep the tone of the environment that you're working in, helping control that tone and keep it professional, and not stoking the sort of drama fire of things. Unfortunately, I see that happen a lot with clients, and they get all in a tizzy about stuff. And it's, first of all, a lot of times it's their own emotional response to it, it's not representative of their client. And secondly, it doesn't help their client when they're all like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they responded that way. No, that's not going to help you when you're trying to negotiate with your client. Sometimes people don't think that they're negotiating with their client, but truly, when you're trying to help your client figure out what you guys need to do, let's just say in the case of a buyer, and you get say you get a counter offer, if you just respond with, oh, I cannot believe they did this, that's not, you're not being professional, first of all. And secondly, you're controlling what's being said, or the vibe of it, and you're controlling it, taking it down a bad path. So what you can do is keep it professional and stay neutral in it. Stay like a leader, a guide. Think of yourself as a guide through this. And when you're trying to guide your people through this and help them come to a happy ending, keeping your ego in check, keeping your attitude in a great place, keeping a can do, we can figure this out. Sometimes it's like saying, like, oh man, yeah, I can totally understand. Like, put yourself in their shoes. Let's think about how they're thinking about it. And you're guiding this process along, and you're actually negotiating with your client. You're trying to help them come to a place. Like I just did that with these buyers I was telling you about, when we got essentially a verbal counter a little right before this class, and the agent's like essentially saying what we sent over is going to be offensive to his sellers. I had to go back to my clients and negotiate with them to help them see the situation the way I'd already seen it, but I knew that they needed to come down that path a little ways in order to feel better about it. So that was my negotiating to find a win-win with them. I knew we had to come up higher. I just knew that they needed to also walk down the path. So I helped paint a picture for them. We walked through this stuff this afternoon, and I basically negotiated to get them to come up to a price that was more likely to be successful. And I don't often think of it as negotiations, but that's really what we're doing. So, and the next point on this, refer back to motivation, was exactly one of the aspects I used. Help them, remind them why we're doing what we're doing, and help them to see the goals that they've communicated to us. Anybody that's coached with me knows that one of the things I talk about is when especially when we get into it, is actually we talked about this in the buyer consult thing that I taught, find out what's going on, find out their why, really get to know what's going on with your people. And then this is the point where you come back and say, well, back when I remember you telling me that X and Y is important. I remember you telling me that this is, and so when you come back to that motivation, again, this is all negotiating. You're negotiating with your client, and then you're going back to, maybe that's the other agent, talking to them and figuring out them. Often I had a transaction with a very high D personality agent, and I had to just stroke her ego in the right ways all the time. And she just thought I was the best thing ever, because I knew that how she needed to feel about herself and the thing in order to feel better about how we were negotiating, because she had a need to win. So I figured out how to stroke her ego and make her feel like but just leave her feeling like she's where she wants to be. And so then we can actually get to the business of real estate and not have her ego in the way. I know it sounds, well, it was intentional. I will say that it's not contrived. It's just, how do you communicate with people, right? How do you negotiate? You get to know who they are, how they tick, and then you figure out how to work with them, right? Listen more than you talk is a really important aspect of that. Ask questions. So that's really your biggest tool there, right? Ask questions. This goes for all the stuff you guys are learning. Ask questions, and you will find, really, has anybody ever heard the kind of the phrase, what is it? How does it go? Oh yeah, it's he who speaks first loses, or whatever, when you're negotiating. Like, you put something out there on the table, and then you just sit back and wait. And has anybody ever kind of heard that talked about? It's an interesting and uncomfortable truth, really. I don't enjoy it. I'm not great at it. When I'm in my best self, I do really good at it. When I'm not, it's hard. It's super hard. I don't want to just leave something sitting on the table there and nobody says anything, So yeah, if you ask questions, especially hard questions, that's your best strategy. Because really, when you're asking your spouse or, your kid about something, or your clients or whatever, just ask the hard question and then just sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait. And if you're listening and you're asking the right questions, they will reveal their position. They will reveal what's really going on. You'll get insight into whatever it is the subject you're talking about. And that's where the real magic happens. When you get to that insight, when you kind of get in, you don't have to get in their head, but when you get in their head, and if you can, that's where you really have an opportunity to help steer what it is you're trying to accomplish in this, And as I touched on this earlier, don't be attached to the outcome. That's where the drama happens. If you're so wrapped up in, you feel like you need to win for your clients, you're going to end up tanking deals that way. I'm just telling you that right now. If you I'm just going to assume the best. I'm hoping nobody here does this, but there are lots of agents that, and even in their best intentions, are getting in the way of deals being successful for their clients, because they're so intent on showing their clients that they won, or that they can make this happen, or that, whatever, right? I mean, I can totally get you that fridge. And then they can't, because the seller's not giving it up. And now they're like, and then they're so wrapped up in it because it was all about them. It was all about them as an agent, and about what they think they can accomplish, and what's going to happen, and whether they're going to make a commission on that one, and whatever. Don't get wrapped up in that outcome, because that'll just wreck your thinking, and it will, at the very least, it's really hard to keep clear on the goal and negotiate, well, when you're emotionally wrapped up on the outcomes. That's why third-party negotiators are so important, even when people are good at it, having a third party, because they're not, we should be that neutral third party. We should be that person in between. I mean, as I say many times in this industry to people, we should have a willing seller and a willing buyer. And we, as the realtors, are there to facilitate a successful transaction. We're not there to fight over it. And people just get it in their head that they have to fight and win. And it's like, no, we're here. This buyer wanted to buy and this seller wanted to sell. We're not in court over neither party wants to be there. This isn't like a lawsuit, So don't put it in that kind of framework, right? Sometimes it is tension, tenuous. Sometimes it is full of tension and other, challenges. Yes. And one of the best techniques for that, I'll tell you right now, is connect with the other agent and make it clear that you and that other agent are there to help this deal succeed. And you're going to advocate for your client to the best you can. And the goal is to help bring the two together. That's our goal. And if you do that, I guarantee you will close more deals than your fellow realtor. You will more deals per deals written. Let's just say you will close a higher percentage of the deals you write. You will have better success with the deals, getting them to the finish line. And the less you do that, the more deals you're going to have fall out. I mean, I can tell you that after 20 years in this business, and I've coached a lot of agents and sat around listening to agents talk. And yeah, that's your success. It's key to success right there. So, do you have any other any other tips that you can think of? I mean, that I didn't cover. Anybody want to throw anything in there before I move on to the kind of the next common areas? So, I mean, some of these are, obvious. What are we negotiating? We're negotiating price, terms. Truly, I mean, we know this stuff, right? This is our industry. This is what we do. We're negotiating all this stuff. Truly, a lot of these types of points on page 13, if we just look at them: price, terms, closing costs, closing date, conveyances, earnest money, option fee, repairs. I mean, a lot of that stuff can be negotiated more easily if you've done your homework, asked questions, set expectations, done all this stuff up front. If you've done all those things I said earlier, these types of things become a lot easier. For example, if you've talked through closing costs is an interesting one, because there's misconceptions about what that is depending on which side of the transaction you're on. So a good example on closing costs might be you have to negotiate as a listing agent with your seller to help them understand why it makes sense for them to pay closing costs, because a lot of sellers might not understand that. So in that case, you're educating them, you're sharing, kind of what does it really mean? It's really the net that matters to you, not like how it comes across. Well, guess what? That conversation would have been a lot easier, and you may not have had to have that conversation had you set expectations up front, had you talked to them when you first took the listing and you guys started down the path of what does it look like to sell your home. Well, if you just, talk to them about that, hey, we get offers in, some will be high, some will be low, blah, 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 there's all sorts of terms. One of the tools people use is they choose to finance in their closing costs. So really it looks like they write it, so it sounds like you're paying them, but you're not really paying them, because they would have just written the offer for, 8,000 lower instead of having you pay that 8,000. So the money that comes in your pocket's the same. And when you're having that rational conversation with them, not in the midst of a transaction, that they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, that could happen. When you set those expectations, now when it happens, you're not having to negotiate with your client about that, because you headed off that sort of point of tension. The likelihood of having to have that conversation goes down. So you're pre-negotiating, if you will, through setting expectations and educating your clients ahead of time. Does that make sense, you guys? I know I'm kind of just, but I guess that's what this class is. So feel free to just shout out if you have a question on anything too. Well, actually, quick question. I can take a minute to speak to some of the things you might encounter on these things. So like the terms like closing costs, closing date, conveyances, earnest money, all those things. I could speak to those things, like some things you might encounter if that would be helpful to you guys. Or we can just leave them there as, those are the kind of topics that you might run into, and you feel comfortable knowing that, and you can just move forward. Which would you guys prefer? Does anybody want me to go through more, like some examples of each?
I would like that. I would
Yeah.
like to hear some examples.
Is that okay? Okay. So like closing costs, I mean, that's what I was talking about there, right? That's a classic one that you'll run into. It's a tool. It's a tool, right? So if you set that expectation with your seller and your buyer, then they'll know ahead of time, this is just a way to solve a problem. Closing costs is one of the other ways that you're negotiating repairs, which is the bottom one, is by using closing costs. So for example, when you're faced with, let's say, and I'll go more into detail in a second, but when you're faced with a repair situation and you have a sense that the seller is willing to do something, you can't just say seller will give the buyer a credit, because that doesn't work for the lender. So if it's assuming it's not a cash transaction, let's just say for the sake of that, we'll make the assumption that we're talking about a finance transaction. You'll use closing costs being paid as a tool to get money back in the hands of the buyer. So instead of the seller simply reducing the price by $5,000, and maybe the seller is going to repair the sewer, and then they're going to give a credit for the other few items, and that comes to, let's just say, $5,000. Or maybe it comes to more, but you guys are kind of negotiating towards just saying, how about we just do 5,000 for all the other stuff that we found? Okay, great. So you're going to say, well, how about if we do it in the form of a closing cost credit, and that helps keep some money in my buyer's pocket, because your buyer, their closing costs is money that they have to come up with out of pocket. That's, there's prepaids, there's taxes, there's different, fees that are in there. And so you can think of negotiating closing costs as a tool that you have in your tool belt to try to address, when you come to repairs. How do we compensate a buyer? And if your buyer could use the cash more than they could, you drop a loan by $10,000 on a average, whatever, $400,000 or $500,000, $600,000 house, it's nothing. Your payment you don't even know your difference in your payment. So for most people, a closing cost credit is going to be a good tool to use in that. And keep in mind, on closing cost credits, there is a maximum. So you'll want to talk to your lender. It can be like 3%, or depending on what it is, but typically you don't have that high of closing costs. So first thing you want to do, if you ever think you're going to use a credit or need a credit in lieu of repairs, first thing to do as a buyer's agent is go to the lender right away and say, hey, what are we looking at for closing costs on this? We're thinking about doing a closing cost credit. How much do you have in there? And then just kind of round down from there, so you don't, if you ever overestimate and it goes to closing, the seller just ends up with the difference. So if you say $5,000 closing cost credit and you get to closing and it turns out the buyer only had $4,800 in closing costs, then that extra 200 just goes back to the seller. So, so at the end of the world, but that's what happens. So, that's
So
why you check.
my,
Yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry. The lender that was doing the transaction that we're in right now, she said that depending on the type of loan, so if it's FHA, she said that you're able to do up to 17% or something like that. I can't remember the exact amount, but she said that what they would do is put it towards the loan, and then you, but that's only with FHAs, is what she was telling me. Is that correct? I mean,
yeah, so
different.
Go with whatever the lender says, because well, number one, it depends on the loan type, like you said. So there will be different parameters for different loan types. Number two, given, I mean, I've been in the business a long time, but that doesn't really mean anything other than I've been in it long enough to have lived through since the crash of 07, 08. And in that time frame, the lending stuff really was, every year was like a roller coaster ride. Like we didn't know, like year to year, like what was going to change. So we had to okay, what are we doing this year, lender? What can we write in? What can't we write in? What can we do? What can't we do? So you just want to keep up with your lender on that and have them look into it. I mean, that's why I said, just the first thing you do is say, hey, lender, here's where we're at. We're trying to do a credit. We're probably going to max it out because the buyer really could use that cash to fix these whatever few things around the house. So, it's they're willing to still pay the price, or maybe you adjust the price too, whatever. So anyway, yeah, that's a good way to use that tool. And also keep in mind, I know this is kind of an aside and might be a lot of information, but one way you can use a credit, you can talk to the lender about this, is you can have, let's say again, it's like the buyer is financing their closing costs, right? So because they truly are financing them. Yet it may be more meaningful then to finance the closing costs rather than just getting the reduced price, right? So that's usually better for their pocketbook. One tool that you can use if you have a lot of credit you're trying to use up is buying down the rate. So right now rates have been super low. And yet if your client's like, this is our forever home, we ain't never leaving, or whatever, or maybe they have a higher risk factor in their because of their credit score or whatever. So they're kind of, there's the credit, it's not supposed to be a class on rates, but essentially you have the market rate, and then there's all these risk factors that are added on. So it's not just a specific lender, but lending products, for based on their loan, their income, and whatever debt and all their stuff, they get like a risk factor kind of percentage added on to the base market rate. So what you can do in some instances, it makes sense if people are like, hey, I've got more cash than I do credit rating. Sometimes they'll just buy down their payment, or buy down their rate to get their payment lower. They'll buy their rate down a percentage point or something. Well, that takes cash up front. And if you're able to burn that up or use, you have a credit to use up, you're trying to burn up $10,000, you can say, well, in this transaction, we only have, $6,000 worth of actual closing costs, like as written. Can you take the other $4,000 and apply it towards a rate buy down? They could, yeah, we could do that, if that helps the client. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? So that's closing costs. Negotiating, again, going to closing date was the next one on this list. Here's the thing. I mean, honestly, what are we negotiating here? We're trying to facilitate a happy ending. All right. We just need to get both parts. We just need to communicate. You need to communicate with the other agent. If you have like in this situation, I'll just use when I was just writing, these particular people, I talked with my clients. I got all their motivation, everything where they're at. I understand their situation. So now with their permission, I can represent that they can close whenever. They can close as soon as the lender could do it, to as long as whatever is good for the seller. You know, they can close whenever, take possession whenever. You know, we have that to give. So in my verbal communications with the agent to help negotiate for the strength of my buyer, which is what I was doing, I was able to say, hey, you know, is there a date that's important to your seller, or no, whatever, or yes, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. I just said, hey, look, we're in a position we can offer whatever the seller wants, just whatever, you know. And that's just it's going to be thrown in the bucket of things to help sway the seller towards, you know, choosing us. You know, if you're in a sticky situation, like I was a month ago with a client where we couldn't get the seller and the buyer on the same page as far as closing date and possession. We just had to keep talking about it and talking it through and trying to find, if this won't work for you, what will? What can we make work? What is it? What's the hang up you have around this? Was there, you know, and we were able to, me and the other agent were able to work it to where we figured out where that common ground was going to work, you know. And it worked because we spent time communicating. We spent time not being the ones in the way of the transaction and being the ones trying to facilitate that. You know, it's just part of the terms of a transaction. And often the best thing you can do is talk to your client ahead of time if you're on the buy side, and, you know, find out how flexible they are and how flexible they aren't. And if you're on the listing side, same thing, you know, really find out what's truly important to them. And if they're like, we absolutely need 2 days after closing, once we have our cash, to go do something, then be upfront about that and say, hey, well, you know, this is where they're at, and or whatever, you know. So that'll help that. Any questions on closing date? I know to me, it seems self-explanatory, but I have to remember that it's just all these years in my head. Conveyances. Oh yeah. So personal property, here's a great one. So what you on the buyer side, it's complete, it's totally back. I'm going to say this over and over again. It's back to setting expectations. So when you walk through a house, do not say to your clients, oh, I can get you that fridge. Oh, I'll get you that stove. Don't do that. That's going to get you in trouble. Not just in trouble, but you're going to set yourself up for looking bad or failure at the very most. So just don't do that. Just say all those things are negotiable. All that fridge, that stove, you know, people always ask, oh, are they leaving the fridge? Oh, are they leaving the chair, the built-in, that looks built-in, you know, little benches in the dining area, whatever, you know, people will ask you that stuff. Say, great question, you know, like, that's a great question. Yeah, I can look into that. It doesn't say it in the listing, or, well, it notes that that all the appliances are included in the listing, but I'm still going to ask and make sure we talk about, you know, like, ask for those things specifically, right? So just set the expectation with your clients so that you have some runway to actually win on their behalf, right? If you just set an expectation that you can get all this stuff, and I know it sounds weird, but I've heard people say this. So I've sat at open houses where agents are showing their people around, and the stuff I hear come out of their mouth, I'm just like, I know you're trying to please people in that conversation, but you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, you know? So my advice to you guys is just don't do that. Give yourself a runway to succeed on, and you'll look better in their eyes. They will know that you're going to advocate for them on those issues, because you know, that's important to them.
Would you ask them, like, specifically, like, okay, so you do like this range or this stove or, you know, whatever, is that a make or break for you though?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
you want to know that information, right? Like, so that you can use it as a negotiation piece. Like you said, these are going, but they're, you know, obviously really nice, and our clients are willing to give them up, kind of as a way to get your offer.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, for sure. That's a good reminder of is this a deal breaker for you? Like, if we can get the house at the right price, but it doesn't include any of these appliances, is that okay? And, you know, just help them, again, setting that expectation that sometimes it's framing the scenario. So if you think of it as, like, when you're setting expectations, sometimes it's framing out what could happen. You know, when we get this house inspected, oh my gosh, they could find 180 things wrong with it, or they might only find 20, you know? I mean, it's like, so your client's already like, okay, you know, that could happen. Like, when you show up and they find 25 things wrong, they're like, oh my gosh, there's 25 things wrong. And you're like, Yeah, all houses have that, but that wasn't where their head was at, right? Because you never kind of helped them see, frame out what could be really. So, hey, if we can get this house, like, I don't know where the seller's at. Maybe they're taking all the stuff with them, right? Is that still, would you still want this house if it doesn't have all that stuff in it? So yeah, setting that expectation. Then on the seller side, the same thing. Is it, I say to people, if the buyer really wants the fridge, is it really worth losing like a sale of your home over a fridge that maybe you can get $500 or $800 or $1,000 on Craigslist because you just bought it a year ago or 6 months ago, but it's used, so you're not going to get full value for it. I mean, is it really worth losing a sale over it? And I try to help people again bracket sort of like, this is like worst case scenario. Are you really willing to tank a deal because of X or Y, and help them see that, so that now when we sit down with an offer or 2 or 3, they're not like, well, I can't believe they want my fridge. You'd be surprised how many people kill deals over fridges. Drives me crazy. I don't know if it's the realtor doing it because they are just so big in their ego and they just have to win on their client's behalf, or it's probably a combination of statistically, clients that are just unreasonable.
Refrigerators are disgusting. I don't want someone else's. I want my own.
It's so funny. It's so funny. People just they will kill deals over it. But I truly, it's ego, not a fridge, right? It's like, what do they call it? Toilet seat issues in a marriage. It's not the toilet seat. It's not the lid on the toothpaste. It's all the other stuff going on that they weren't mentally like prepared for, that's only pushing them over the edge, So transactions, people are high stress and people they get to a point where something that seems stupid is pushing them over the edge. So that's personal, basically personal property. That's my take on it. You have any other questions on personal property or anything? No. Yeah, Courtney.
Mine's not a question so much as an experience that I had when I was buying my home. And I took this and I used it with my client who had very reasonable expectations, by the way. She was not going to kill a deal over a refrigerator, but we did ask for everything that they didn't want to take with them as far as the appliances that were there during showing. But I personally felt like I was spending so much money on this home. And I was, the seller couldn't know this, but when I was buying this home, it was like at the top of our price range. And so really it wasn't even so much an ego as it was like, it almost like broke my heart. Like, this woman doesn't want to like give me $200 so I can just fix the damn front door. Like, it was like a personal thing. Like, and I realize now in hindsight, obviously, like these negotiations, the agents are really the ones doing most of it. And I don't know, it's hard to convey, other than I think the thing I brought to my current experience is like that thing you talked about, where you set yourself up for success with your client and say, I just want you to be prepared with it being a seller's market right now. Anything that we ask for in addition to what's already on the table it's not always possible. I don't remember how I phrased it exactly, but I just said, I didn't want her to get her feelings hurt or whatever, it was like, I don't know how else to say it, but that was one of the things that I remembered about my home buying experience, is that it was a little more emotional than it was, about the number. So. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And you brought it up, like, had the expectations been, communicated, or had been in a mental headspace where you were sort of expecting that, it probably wouldn't have felt emotionally quite so frustrating even, or whatever, you wouldn't have felt so, felt so much about it even, really. You would have seen it more as, okay, I knew this could happen. I don't like it, but it did, that kind of thing. Earnest money and option fee. If you think of it in terms of negotiating tools, a lot of these things, all these things we're talking about here in the terms, if we think about them in terms of tools that help, they're tools that are part of a transaction that we need, right? So all these things are just things, of course, there has to be a closing date. There has to be, there are closing costs, and there's some on both sides of the transaction. They exist. There may or may not be personal property. Typically there's something there. Earnest money is something we put in there. So really, that for me, the negotiation, if you want to call it, the the idea of earnest money is, think of it in terms of like, well, first of all, if you should communicate to your client, the idea of earnest money is that it's a deposit you put down the property to let the seller know you're serious, to kind of say like, hey, I'm putting a deposit down and I'm serious. And I'm serious enough that if I was to put a deposit down and then I just walk away for no reason, that I'm, you know, like the seller gets to keep that, you know, like this is your, like, it's essentially it's a non-refundable deposit unless you know, it's refundable under certain circumstances, which are basically you know, I tell people they're the fair parameters of a sale contract. You know, inspections, you discover something about the house that is, you know, if we have that contingency built in. But if we're talking about negotiation side of it, it's a tool. So I say to a client, you know, one in particular, I know we won without the highest price on a house over in Laurelhurst, which is it was a really hot house. I mean, it was a really good house. And the way we won is, well, two things. One, we gave was closing date. So we leveraged the closing date option, and my client was in a position to essentially give the seller, you know, 2 months to stay there. Statistically, just put this in the back of your head. If you're thinking about using closing dates as a tool, it's the closing date and then a possession date, right? So you have a closing date. And again, you should be having this conversation ahead of time with your client so that they know and understand. Closing date is the date that you fund, everything funds, and your name is put on title, the other name's taken off of title in the bank, the money's transferred. The date that you get the keys, so this is again upfront telling this, the date that you get the keys or possession of the property can be that same day. And you know, it's sort of laid out in a contract it could potentially almost by default be that you could say that day, yet it is totally negotiable, and it's going to differ based on the situation. And in our current market, your dialogue is going to be more like, in this market, often a seller will need some sort of possession after closing. Often we see as much as 2 to 3 months. Again, I'm setting and then clients go, oh my God, that long? I'm like, yeah, totally. So they kind of get it, and I go, and you know what? Sometimes to win the offer, you gotta give it to them for free. And they're like, what? You know, so then anything we negotiate past that, they feel good about, right? So I've set that expectation that sometimes to win an offer, we have to give a month or 2 or 3 of free rent. And that's what it takes. I go, it's just like you basically offered, let's say your mortgage payment is $2,000 a month, you paid $400 for the house, and it's like you offered 2 months of free rent. So it's like you paid $4,400 for the house, you know. But if we're gonna increase a price on a multiple offer situation to try to beat out you know, another price, we're not increasing it by a couple thousand. We're going all in at like $5,000, $10,000 increments. You know, we don't know what the other offers are, so we're not going to be like, you know, well, let's just go 1,000 more and hopefully we're higher. It's like, no, you're not going to be higher. You may not be. You know, so what we do is we offer a strong price and then give them these terms that make it really comfortable. So one of those terms is closing date, of course, and that's, as an aside, statistically, most sellers don't stay in the house that long. They get out, you know, as soon as they get their money in their pocket, they're like, we are out of here. So there are times when they need it all, of course, but I would say in my experience over the many years, the vast majority of the time, the sellers are out early. They just are, you know, they're done. Especially, it's really funny, the ones that are the most insecure about it. Like, so if the agent says, oh, their house is being built, it closes in April, they really need possession until then, okay, fine, whatever. You kind of, that's an expectation. You know that going in, it's going to be that. But if they're like, oh, my client's really worried, they don't have a house yet, they don't know where they're going, blah, blah, blah. Well, then you go, well, Mike, and you talk to your buyer and you're just like, why don't we just offer them 2 or 3 months of free rent? You know, oh my gosh, you know, and so then the seller is like, oh, thank you. It's like such a weight off their shoulders that they know they don't have to move out right away. And they're out in like 3 weeks because as soon as you got the offer secured and went to your inspection, they went out and found another house and bought it and put an offer in, and now they're moving out. I mean, they're done. They're out of there. And they, you know, or maybe they've paid, it doesn't have to be free rent, but maybe they've even paid a rent back. The one I just did was, it's well over $1 million, and we had to pay, I negotiated an even higher per diem because I just felt that was what my client deserved. And we ended up getting, like, they moved out early. They'd already paid for it all. I mean, up front, you know, because they wouldn't give us early possession. We tried and tried and tried, kept asking. and they just wouldn't commit to it. And then lo and behold, the week before, all of a sudden they're just magically out and they said, you can move in. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, but
When
earnest
you-
money is a tool. Yeah.
When you were writing offers, Aaron kind of did like a contract class with us yesterday, and he said that there's like two kinds. Like agents will either put them as like additional provisions if they're going to do like a different possession date, or they'll do like a whole addendum. What's your personal preference?
The best way to do it contractually is to put it in there. So in the contract, in the Oregon State form, it talks about possession, 5 p.m. closing, and it talks about another date. And if it's another date, you really should do that and then fill out a possession after closing document and submit it with the offer. I'm hoping that by this point in the process that you've actually talked to the other agent and somewhere in there or emailed or somehow gotten enough information to know where the other party is coming from and have at least enough to sketch that out and fill it out. You're not just guessing on all of it, because if you're guessing on all of it, either the other agent is not cooperative, which does happen, or you're not doing your due diligence and finding out everything you can find out to write an offer that's gettable. It's like they call it a gettable listing or a gettable like offer. Write an offer that's agreeable, that make it as agreeable as you can on the front end, and don't put in there things that are likely to cause the buyer or the seller to have to respond, because then you've now given them the reason to counter. And once they counter, they're going to start countering anything else that they thought they might counter. But if there's a few things they were on the edge about and it's otherwise clean, they'll just sign it a lot of times. That's usually what happens, because when they counter, it's like saying no. Whenever you counter, remember, a counter offer is a rejection that has a set of circumstances by which they would still do the deal with you. So just keep that in mind. I would always say possession, it's best to put it as a thing. I can see why some people slip it in additional provisions, but I don't know, you're not fooling anybody, and you're still going to need a possession after or agreement to occupy after closing form. So I don't see any advantage of that. It kind of leaves your client more open, honestly, because that form still needs to be filled out and still needs to be agreed to. So you may as well present it as part of your offer. That's what I would say. But earnest money as a tool, now I know I kind of jumped around that, but it reminded me that as a tool, earnest money shows can be an aspect of like showing strength of your buyer. So like this one in Laurel's I was talking about, my gal put down $100,000 in earnest money. That's a lot of money. But you know what? She was in a position where if they, like, first of all, we are going to follow the contract to the T to make sure she's not exposed to losing that earnest money because of me or something else, right? Which we should be doing anyway. Second, I asked her, I said, are you in a position to continue to shop for a home if something goes sideways in this transaction and you're entitled to your earnest money, but the seller, is fighting it, so it gets hung up in kind of, I don't want to in court, but it gets hung up in limbo until it gets sorted out. Are you in a position to continue to shop? Is that going to harm your ability to continue to buy a home? And she's like, no. So I said, well, let's put down a really strong earnest money. Let's put down a big earnest money check. And that says, we are serious. Like, we're intending to close this house. We're not just saying, well, here's a few $1,000s. We're saying, no, we're basically buying this house from you right now, and that's exactly, we came in, the other agent was a Keller Williams agent and in my office, actually, as it turned out. And she said, I have to tell you that there were higher offers, but your closing or your possession date thing, and she said, it was brilliant. You put down this ginormous earnest money. And she's like, my sellers are like, this gal's done. They just signed the offer. They're like, she's serious, So it's a tool. When you can utilize it, you want to have your client understand what it is and understand what the risk is, but also use it as a tool to show strength for your buyer. It can be a great negotiation tactic that's kind of often overlooked. So again, it is a risk, and you need to educate your client on what it is and what that might mean. If they only have $10,000 in their name and you put down $8,000, and something goes weird or sideways and it takes a while to resolve it, then that kind of hurts their ability to continue to shop, you know. Just keep that in mind. That might happen, but usually not. I mean, that's pretty rare, you know. So yeah, and then repairs. I think we kind of talked about repairs in that they are, you know, don't kill repairs over, you know, think of it in terms of a how do you, it totally depends on the market, totally depends on the strength of the buyer and the seller, totally depends on the situation, but you're again trying to facilitate a situation that works for your buyer and a situation that works for your seller. So depending on which side you're on, you know, you got to find a solution, be solution oriented, and, you know, look for ways to, you know, sometimes the idea of talking about the three biggest items or all the big things that are wrong with the house, and then setting the expectation with your client that you're going to present all of these things, and then you're going to come back off of that. Sometimes that's a good negotiation. If you're in a market that has a lot of give and take, you know, it's like both sides have power. You know, in a true, like this summer or spring, you know, in a true like seller's market, you're going to tell your buyers up front, hey, we're getting an inspection, basically, assuming you got that negotiated in, which you always should. We're getting it just for information, or if there's any real deal killers here. And we just, you know, you're negotiating with your client by setting expectations up front that this inspection is going to turn up all sorts of stuff potentially, but all we're really looking for here is there anything worth walking away from the house over, you know, done. And then that's it. That's all you get, you know. Or, you know, for the market now is shifting where you can ask for some things and say, hey, really, we just set the stage, talk to the other agent, do all your magic and building rapport and finding out their ego position and, you know, negotiating with them to kind of present your client. And then in like, you know, like a general sense, and then you present these offer and they're like, yeah, I'll see what I can do with that. I get it. You know, I feel for your client, you know, whatever, you know, you've kind of, that's all negotiation. It's all, you know, you're working together to find a happy outcome that both parties are willing to live with, you know. So that's that. Let's move on to any questions on that. Those are I know we spent a bit of time on that, but those are your kind of big ones practically, right? When it comes to an offer. Is that helpful? I mean, like I was kind of, again, I'm just sort of shotgunning through a lot of these. But, you know, these are all real world type stuff we're going to deal with, right?
Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah.
I appreciate it anyway.
As we think about, so the tactics, maybe you might say, that we've been talking about here. So if we jump to the next page, 14, prepare, present, position. You know, what we're going to review here in these three P's basically is the theory, if you will, behind what I was just talking about, right? Prepare, you know, like if we know this, it says right here, actually, the fourth one down, it says know your goal, which we talked about, right? Know what you're trying to achieve there, and know your client. So obviously you spent the time to get to know your client, right? Know their goals, know what's important. And now you're thinking ahead about what might, you know, if I say this, what might come out of this. So again, on the fourth one, setting clear expectations, right? So if you've done all of that preparation, your chances of succeeding, and I'm not going to say win, because your chances of succeeding in negotiations now is at a way higher level. You know, it's at a much, much higher level. Of course, we have to say that, you know, obey the laws, obviously on page 15, it's important. Know your documents, know what you're working with. You know, it's just, if you're not sure, ask your coach, ask somebody in the office, just get clarity on it. The PB, you know, whoever is there for you, make sure you're just like, hey, I don't understand this, or what they send over, or make sure you know what you're negotiating. I forgot, I just thought of something that I meant to tell you about earlier on the repairs. On anything, when you're writing a contract, your contract is a set of directions, basically, right? It says this person's going to do this, this person's going to do this, this person's, right? That's what a contract states. Like, here's the party that's going to do it, what it is, right? It's not where you write a book about, well, the buyer doesn't like electrical issues, so they're asking for $2,800 for the electrical issues because they're really stressed about. No, that's not what you put in an addendum. You write, you just write it very simple. And if there's a story, then that's where the communications you'd have with the other agent, that's where all the things that you've done to kind of to be prepared, as it says here, you've laid the groundwork. That's where all the opportunity to kind of talk through that, if you will, and communicate that if it's necessary to the parties involved. That's where that happens. Don't put that in your addendum or whatever else. That's not helpful, nor is it good contract practice. The attorneys hate that when they see people writing a freaking book in their addendums, because they're trying to communicate their position via the addendum. I'm like, why don't you write that in an email, and ask the agent to forward it? Why don't you cover that in a conversation with the agent and then follow it up in an email, just in case the agent forgot some of it? I mean, that's your best tactic, So as you prepare, of course, let's jump into 16. It has a little scenario here. And I think it's an interesting, because it's kind of a little bit like, it gives you some details, but then doesn't give you much more. So everybody kind of have that looking at it. So it says, we can read the scenario. I'll give you just a second. How about you just take 30 seconds. I'm going to read it. So that's kind of like not so different than our market. I mean, the numbers don't really matter, but say a house is listed at X, looks like it might need a loan. You have a buyer, looks like a sort of a first time buyer, whatever. Doesn't have a lot of excess cash, right? These are things you guys are getting out of that, right? So if we were to think about it, what are some questions we would ask our client? Let's say you're representing that buyer, right? So what are some clarifications you would ask your buyer in this scenario, given what you know about this?
Well, if there's been a lot of activity on it, you'd want to make sure that they really like it.
Yeah.
And they're really interested.
Yep. Anyone? Bueller?
I might ask them if they were able to, repair the roof, or if they needed that to be done. The buyers, if they were able to afford it.
Yes, that's one of the key questions for sure.
Because they're 20,000 less than asking. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Along those lines, maybe you could ask expectation. So what is their expectation? So Julie just said, are you in a position, so you could say this, are you in a position to take on that repair after closing? And your client's going to say yes or no, right? So are you in a position to, anytime a house has, this, again, back to your buyer consult type of scenario where you're talking to your client. So if we find a house that needs some repairs, you've kind of talked to them about understanding their down payment, how much cash reserves do you guys have on that? If we did find a house and it needed, this market, we don't have a lot of options for repair negotiation. So if we did find something like the perfect house, but it looks like it needs some major repairs, are you in a position to weather getting that done financially? Is that, and honestly, a lot of people are going to say, no, we're really not, we're not in that position. So then you're going to ask, what's the next question, right? You're going to say like, okay, so, should we just, whatever, some version of, we need to negotiate in those repairs, or if we see a house that needs those things, then, I check with the listing agent. And if that's not something that the seller's willing to do, if you guys have been looking at the market, you've seen those listings where it says seller to do no repairs, and you're looking at it going, man, that's going to need, whatever, electrical is a mess, furnace is, suspect. You could say to your buyers, would you be comfortable with a home warranty for all those old appliances and all that stuff? Would that, if we could at least negotiate that in, or, even if you're buying it for yourself, you have a home warranty for a couple of years would that give you guys more peace of mind? Would you be able to, they'd be like, yeah, we could swing that, we'll have more money in 6 months or whatever their deal is, right? Just find out. And then you can help guide them, right? That's, you're there to help guide them. like, and then to the other point, it's like, well, what if, so, you're talking to your buyer, Mr. Buyer, like, so if we make an offer at 155, how do you feel about if the seller just counters right back at list price again, knowing that it needs a roof now? What's your feeling? Did you still want the house? Right? That's a question you can ask up front as you're framing out the scenario for your client, right? Are you okay with taking it at that price point? So like these people I just was working with earlier today, their answer was no. I mean, there's a flinch point for them where they're not going to pay more, and that's fine. So I said, where is that at for you? And they basically said, we don't know exactly what it is, but we know it's not the list price. We feel like it's somewhere in this area where we don't have an exact price that we're married to, but we feel like we need to get into it somewhere around this area to feel good about it. I'm like, okay, fair enough, right? So now whatever the response is, we can work with that. Is any questions on that, or does that kind of make sense, right? To you guys?
Would you voice it in such a like roundabout way, or would you just say like, what is the most you're comfortable paying for this? Like, yeah,
you would try to get them
kind of straightforward with it.
Yeah, some people, what I've found over the years is that some people have a price in mind, and so then sometimes it's just a matter of understanding. Did you? I'll say to them, so is that like a price that you've run the numbers, or it's related to your payment or something else, or is it like you just have it in your head that emotionally you feel like this house is only worth $490, and I just don't feel comfortable paying more. So if they come back and offer or counter you at $491, you're going to walk away. Well, no, I'd pay $491. Okay, so if they come back and counter at $495, you're going to walk away. Well, no, I'd pay $495. Right? You can play that game with them and see where they're at, and see if you can help understand. If they came back on this example, so if they came back at 175, would you walk away with no thing? Yeah, we wouldn't do it. So if they came back at 170, would you do it? With no roof, how do you feel about that? Well, no, we wouldn't do it. Well, we'll walk at over 160. You're like, okay, so they came back at 162, you'd walk. Well, okay, so maybe we would do it at 162, we're not going any higher, right? You're negotiating, you're just trying to frame out for your client and understand, so they understand how they can best, succeed in this whatever. Basically, you're negotiating with your client to help them frame out an offer that's successful, right? Those are just questions that you ask, and you try to identify really where they're at and what the parameters are that you have to work with, and understand the situation so that you can then negotiate. Like I tell my clients, I'm not going to present your best position to the other party, but I need to know where you're at so I know how to negotiate, So like on the repairs, for example, really that's a tough one, because you often these days will end up in negotiations over repairs, and repairs will kill deals, right? So what I say to people is, after, again, this is coming from the position that I've already set expectations, I've already laid out, so I'm working off of that sort of path of success already. So this conversation is a lot easier given that path that I've already laid out for them. But I'm like saying, like, so so we get the repair or the inspection back, and there's all this stuff on it, are assuming there's no like big deal killers like foundation. I always tell people like a foundation's falling apart or something that like we just need to run, right? Assuming none of that's wrong with it, are you guys good with buying the house as is? Now, not you would prefer them to do repairs. I always say this. So like, I know you'd prefer them to do repairs, but let's just say they say no to anything. Are you still good with buying the house? They're like, yes, I'm still good with buying the house. Okay. I go, now, knowing that, I'm going to do my best to get any repairs, anything I can, I'm going to do my best to try to get for you, right? I'm going to work on that. We're going to try to get that. But since I know that you're willing to buy it anyway, I won't kill the deal over it. I'll push as hard as I can without killing the deal, right? But if they're like, no, if they will not do the roof, we are walking away, period. Then you know that's the point where the deal is going to fall apart. So you go, okay, what else can I do? Why don't I ask for the roof and the sewer and the 3 electrical issues, and then have a verbal conversation with the agent and say, look, I'm working with my client. I think, I know the roofs as a deal killer for them. These other things are important to them. If you can work it out with your client to get like the roof and maybe a couple of these things, that would be helpful. We could probably keep the deal together. whatever. And then, whatever you can do to kind of verbally give them something that they can go to their client and then work it back from them, right? So you're kind of giving them enough information that they feel like maybe they have some traction to come back, and their clients can feel like they're not giving up everything. At the same time, you haven't said that your clients don't want any of that stuff. You're just making it clear that, that's important. And, there's a point where my clients are going to walk. So, then you just work it out. You have a conversation. I talk to my clients, and then you guys go back and forth, and okay, well, I talk to my clients too. And, if you can do the roof and whatever, we're in. And they say, okay, fine. They're willing to do that. And then you've kind of pulled it together, so anyway, that's just an aside. Knowing what you know ahead of time, and knowing that you set those parameters with your client, then now anything you negotiate within that is more likely to have a successful outcome. Does that make sense? So, and I've been kind of going into the second P, which is present. Of course, I've talked about present, I think, throughout this. On page 17, it talks about the presentation of it is key. I agree. It is one of the most, how you present, how you come across, is so, like I already talked about, is so important and so critical to the success of everything. If you are, if you're leading with your ego, or leading with, I'm going to win, or I'm going to show them, obviously your chances of success are lower. That doesn't have to be a pushover. You just have to be professional and be firm and just say, hey, that's great. A great comeback is always like, yep, I totally understand. Tell you what, I'll talk to my client about that, and like, you're like totally not emotionally, like, you're not like, oh, and if I had a dime for every time, I'm telling you, for every time a listing agent, particularly, these are listing agents, because they tend to be more type like a D personality. That's just like, especially, anyway, where I presented something that a buyer was whatever, and it doesn't, my client's not going to go for that. I'm like, well, maybe you could ask them for me, because you're not the one selling the house, or it's not your house to sell, it's theirs. I'm thinking to myself,
Aren't they required to show all offers?
What's that?
Aren't they required to show them all the offers?
They are. So
didn't we text on that? I feel like I answered that question like 5,000 times.
They actually are. Yeah. Now, how well do they do that or not? But they are required. Yeah. And if you get a sense that they haven't, of course, there can be, concerns, not that you would necessarily change the outcome for your client, but, there's definitely people griping about it in this crazy market. Obviously, there's people, anyway. Yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it is required. And so you don't always know. And if you want to have better success with that, can you guys guess what I'm about to tell you next? Build rapport with that agent, call them, talk to them, get on their side, be that kind of person that they want to be in a transaction with. If you're that kind of person, guess whose offer is definitely getting presented, whether it's good or not, like yours. I mean, that's how you win deals, is you connect with the other agent, be respectful. If you figure out that they're a type D personality right off the bat, then don't waste their time. Don't spend endless time on the phone with them. Get to the point. Say, I know you're busy. I have a quick question for you. Is this a good time? Like, you're being direct, and they're like, yeah, it's good. Or no, call me back later. I'm busy. Okay. Don't take it personally. Just say, fine. Respect them. If they're a chatty and a super high S personality, which I love negotiating with, because man, I can get into them. I can get in their head big time. I love those kind of agents, because by the end of it, they want to, like, I'm their best friend, like we're like besties at the end of the deal, so I know I can, and I don't want to sound negative about it, but I can help us come to a positive outcome in the transaction very easily when I'm working with somebody like that, because I'm able to get them talking and able to help them see, like, we're putting this together, and I'm appeal to their emotions and all this stuff, so that's all presentation though. That's all how you connect. So I just talked about the D personality, pay attention to nonverbal cues. So their cadence of speech, all those kinds of things, to get a sense of their personality type, that helps you. We only have so much to work with right now in our current environment. And obviously we're not presenting offers in person, but yeah, pay attention to those kinds of cues. Any questions so far, anybody? The next one down says pay attention once you present an offer. So that's the thing, right? In negotiations, as I said earlier, it's that he who speaks first loses. So you're presenting your offer of negotiation, whatever that is, and then you're listening to see how they respond, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. As I've already talked about, pay attention to what they're saying, listen, and stay calm. I mean, we've talked about all this stuff already, right? I guess I kind of was spelling all this out as I was talking through it.
So can you generally expect like acknowledgement of that they've received your offer, or
that would be nice.
typical?
I will tell you, the first thing I would say is don't get bent out of shape when it doesn't happen. Just don't let that ruin your day, because that means you're getting in your own head. And one way to avoid drama with your client is say, hey, this is a really busy property, looks like they got multiple offers. They'll say, oh, are they going to respond? Are they going to get back to us tonight? Whatever. Your client's always going to ask something around that. You're going to have a dialogue that tees this up for you. So this isn't like you have to say this out of the blue. And then you're going to be like, something, depending on what they say, you're going to say something like, well, sometimes they get right back to us. I said, sometimes these agents are just really busy, and sometimes they only respond to the one party. They don't always get right back to us. Sometimes they don't tell anybody except for the offer that was accepted. Sometimes they tell us all, and I said, most of the time they don't tell us why we weren't accepted in this busy market. So I'll try my best to get that information. I'll try to understand where they're coming from. If our offer isn't the one that's accepted, I'll try to see if there's an opportunity for a backup position or something, just to get a sense of, what we can do to put the deal together. But just know that, hey, Mr. Client, Mr. Buyer, just know, hey, we may not get any information out of them, and we just may have to move on to the next one. And if you just set that expectation, then when that happens, which it will happen, then it's not a big deal. Your client will, how come they didn't tell us? Which is what they'll do if you don't set that expectation. They'll get all frustrated. Well, I just saw on Redfin, and you'll get all frustrated going, oh, damn it, that dang listing agent didn't tell me. And, it's, why is it that this is on like real estate forums all the time, every day. People are like,
yeah, I see them on Facebook.
Yeah, they're just griping about it all the time. And you know what? It happens. So is it good practice as a listing agent? No, it's piss poor listing agent representation, and you should be better than that. And I'm hoping all of you never do that. At the very least, you write a nice email and you copy paste, send it to all the agents that submitted an offer. That's all you got to do. Thank you for your amazing offer. I really appreciate the time you spent on this. I know it takes a lot of work in this market, blah, blah, blah. Acknowledge that it sucks and it's hard, and you know what they did and the work they put into it. Acknowledge all that and cut and paste. And if you can make it slightly more personal for anybody you actually kind of know, even better. If you do that, good way to win friends. What's the book? Win friends and influence people. Just communicate like that. Respect them, and those are the seeds you plant throughout your career that will pay off. I'm just going to toot my own horn. I've done that throughout my career, and I could tell you regularly how it pays off. I have agents this year, they call me out of the blue. They just say, hey, I love working with you. You're great. I have this house, this is the situation. Do you have anybody interested? I would rather work with you than anybody else. I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Here's what I'm looking for. And they're like, great, let's just write it up. It's not even on the market. They just call me because they're like, they know working with me won't be a headache and a drama fest. And they know that I'm not going to, lie to them and they know if I'm working with these clients, and my clients aren't going to be crazy, weird people or whatever the deal is. And, I've set expectations, and they know all that, because I've set that tone, and they know they respect me. So these are people at other companies. That just call me out of the blue and offer houses to me, for my clients. So I know that's because I've spent all this time working with people and just doing my best to respect all of us out there doing the job. Right. So anyway, okay, where are we at here? Giver offers the best chance, nonverbal cues. So I'm on page 18. It talks about nonverbal cues. do you want to talk through this a little bit? Do you guys have a good sense of what that looks like? Positive, negative? Do you want to offer some examples of that? Do you guys want to take, obviously it says here we could take a few minutes and write some down. Or do you want me to kind of just talk through it real quick? What would you guys prefer? It's your class.
I'm fine either way.
Either way.
It works better for me if you talk through it, but
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll just throw out, how about this? So when you are, this is an easy one. You guys should know this. This is like not a trick question. What are some negative face-to-face kind of nonverbal cues? Anybody?
Backing away,
Backing away, yeah.
arms crossed.
Yeah.
Frowning,
What's that?
frowning.
Oh, frowning. I thought you said yawning. I'm like, didn't
No,
just do that.
that's just me, but I don't mean anything by it.
No, it's okay.
No
Yeah.
eye contact.
checking their phone over and over again.
Or their
Like-
watch.
Yeah, or their watch.
Yep.
No eye contact.
Yeah, that's a great one. The tough thing about eye contact, I'll tell you, is unfortunately that's also can be a personality and confidence thing too. So just be mindful. That's one of the examples of something I'd be mindful of. I wouldn't hang an entire outcome on that. But it's something to pay attention, especially when you package it with everything else, right? What are some positive ones that you have experienced, like face-to-face with somebody?
If somebody like turns their body like towards you, that means
Yeah.
they're like open to what you're talking about, or they're receptive.
That's a great one. Yep.
Smiling or laughing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
It's engaged in the conversation.
exactly. Yeah. Asking questions, those are verbal, but the way they ask questions is, or their intent, I always to call it that, if you take the nonverbal side of asking questions is mentally, they're choosing to ask questions, they're engaging with you. And then obviously the words that they choose are the verbal part, but they're engaging. Yeah, those are all really good ones. What are some ways that we can use some of those types of cues, and we'll call them nonverbal cues, but obviously it's part of your speech, but let's call it like the nonverbal side of it on the phone. What are some positive things that we, ways we can convey being positive while on the phone?
Smiling
Yeah.
on the phone is really important.
I hope you all have seen or heard the studies on that like you smile on the phone and people can tell that if you're smiling. Like it's just been proven like enough that we don't have to like even really discuss it. It's just a fact,
Like standing up when you're on the phone too. It's like your energy. Like if you're sitting and you're like, bleh, then people can hear that, even if you're not. Even if you're like speaking with positive words.
Yeah, those are great examples of. So I'll put it this way: like if your intention is to deliver a positive, whatever aura about you, if you want to call it that, to the other party, yeah, smiling and standing up, and if that's your intention, then all those things are going to result in all these verbal and nonverbal cues coming across more positively to the other party, right? And then vice versa, we can hear that if we're paying attention to the other people. An upbeat voice, right? Tone of voice, obviously that's a big one. Because we can say words, or we can say words, those are like the same words, but said differently, right? Yeah, those are kinds of things.
Your tone, like your speech pattern, like your cadence, right? Those things all impact.
Yeah.
And then like how your volume with someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to match with them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, matching, finding them. There's that phrase "mirror and match" is effective. I think it was in the. I've talked about it before. If you've been on with me before, I'm sure other people have too. It's you can take it too far. Let's just be honest here, people. If you're just totally copying somebody, sometimes I do it with other people that I know this, just to see if they pick up on it. But it's funny, is a lot of times people don't. They just feel like, they'll be like talking, and then I'll be like, then I'll put my elbow down, and then they'll be like, like they'll sit back, and then I'll sit back, and then, whatever. I'll literally just slowly kind of copy everything that they're doing. And I've had a few times be like, are you mirror matching me? It's like, yes, I totally am. It's like, but most people don't. Most people just don't pick up on that. And it's not that's not the point of it, right? The point is to be in rapport, as I was talking about before, being in rapport with people. So
they catch you because they're trying to mirror and match you, and they're like, wait a second, am I controlling this? What's happening?
Yeah. It's like selling to somebody who's in sales, who's also trying to sell it to you at the same time. You're like, wait, like, I just called to recruit you. Did you just recruit me? Oh, how did that happen? It's like, what just happened there? So anyway, those are examples of, nonverbal cues. And as you all know, it's super important. Oh yeah, good read on negotiation, never split the difference. You're right. That is a good one. Thank you for that, Stella. Yeah, there's some really great, honestly, there's a lot of really great negotiation stuff out there. What we've talked about today, if you did that well, that's 90, whatever, maybe 95% of what you'll ever need in negotiations. If you heard what I was talking about and kind of really heard and took that to heart. The reality is always be learning, right? Always look at where you can learn along the way. This isn't something you need to stop doing real estate and figure out how to negotiate first. What you do need to do is keep driving forward. And every time you have a conversation, every time a deal falls through, go to somebody, talk to a coach and say, how could I have negotiated this differently? What could I have done to prepare or present or do something different so that this had a better chance of success? And sometimes the answer is nothing. You did it all right, right? So just know that that's okay. That happens sometimes. And if you're choosing to be coachable and teachable and trainable, just keep moving and make adjustments, right? If you're not getting along with the agent, reach out and ask for, your lifeline call and say, hey, I feel like I just got a lot of tension with this agent. We're in a transaction. I don't want this thing to fall apart. We're about to get into repair negotiations on this thing. Help me to kind of figure out what to do, help me to get this thing, if I can, try to get it back on track, So, and sometimes it's just because they're having a bad day, right? We all know that. I mean, sometimes it's just something just happened in their life, and it's just, you just don't know, right? So anyway, this next page gets into, I think it's 19 here, gets into like tactics. We can talk about some of these tactics. I'd like to kind of just highlight a few of them. I think we've talked through a lot of these things already, truly, in my opinion. So I'm just going to touch on them because they're in your book to kind of remind us back to like what we already talked about. Is that okay with you guys if I do it that way? So like the first one talks about nibbling, once your clients agreed on one major concession, the other part. So really what you're doing there is just what I talked about. You're just trying to figure out, like, ultimately, if you're working with your client, you're trying to just figure out how can you best represent the outcome that they're after. And, you don't need to just basically like let somebody keep chipping away at what you're negotiating. You don't just need to be like in a seller's market, actually in a buyer's market. If you're in a buyer's market as a seller and the buyer just keeps asking for more and keeps asking for more, you can usually avoid that by right up front, kind of making a better, setting expectations better. Like, and really just as it says, like if it's like one little thing, then they ask for one little thing more, or one little thing, ask for questions, say, like ask them back, well, we could do this if you do that, or we can do this, and set an expectation of, we're just trying to make this deal work. Like, well, they just really need, we can repair these things, but we're going to need another week to do it. Is that okay with you guys? Oh, well, no, we don't want that, and again, you're trying to negotiate a successful outcome. So you're coming from the place of how much strength do I have in my tactic that I'm using here? Because you don't want to, the one thing you really got to be careful of, and this is another tip, if you will, but it's another place that agents often misstep, I would say, is they negotiate a position that isn't really their client's position. Maybe it's because they have an ego, I don't know, but they're trying so hard to negotiate for their client that they end up like screwing something up, or they end up killing a deal when their client was actually okay with it, right? So be careful to when you're, when you're utilizing these, kind of chipping away and this nibbling, they call it, it's chipping away at stuff. Hot potato is they talk about, like, just think about these issues and make sure you're not overstepping what your client's position really is, and that you and your client are in agreement on, what I've worked with attorneys who would frankly prefer to negotiate for themselves. They are having a hard time with the fact that I'm negotiating on their behalf, until we talk through it and they realize that I'm doing a good job because I'm not emotionally attached to the outcome the same way they are, and I'm employing these good tactics to try to get the best outcome I can, but I know where they're willing to, what their bottom line is, and I've been successful with all the attorneys I've worked with because of that, because I've employed all these tactics, and they understand that I'm really working for them, and I'm not killing a deal because of something that I overstated, that wasn't their position, right? So like the hot potato idea here talks about, says the other party tries to pass a problem on to you. It's not, people might tell a story, and actually that's a tactic for you on the other end. You could say, gosh, my buyers just don't have the money. And yeah, I mean, utilize those tactics, utilize that, say like, they really can't afford the house. Could we, if anything, can we increase the price and put in a whole new roof? Because my clients just can't afford it. They really need a good roof, or we'll just have to find another house. And sometimes the outcome is you just have to find another house. And sometimes is, what can we do? How about if we split it? Oh, well, maybe my seller would be willing to do that. The roof is 10,000. How about if we increase the price 5 and my client gets a new roof out of the deal? That's a win-win, you guys. I mean, your clients got to be okay with that, but they paid 5,000 more and got a brand new $10,000 roof out of it, that's financed in. It cost them, $4 a month more, because it was not much increase in price, so assuming it would appraise and all that anyway.
Sorry,
yeah.
just one quick question. I just saw I was looking at price reduced, so I was targeting an area and I was looking at price reduced, and I saw one that was a price increase. It was weird. Why would someone do that?
Great question. So
on the listing went up.
Yeah. So I'm just going to speak in generalities because I don't know specifically on that, obviously on that property. The reasons you typically would see that, one might be that they did make some repairs. So they did improve the property. If there was, sometimes you'll see that where there was a sale fail, went off the market pending and then came back on. So sometimes what happens, and this, the seller, there was a bunch of stuff wrong. The buyer is like, I'm out. They just walk, right? So the seller says, well, I'll just fix that stuff. I didn't know. I mean, whatever, right? So they fix a bunch of stuff, and now the house is actually a little bit nicer. So then, now it has a new sewer, and it has literally a new deck because the deck was all bad, or it turns out it was worse than they thought. I don't know, whatever.
It makes perfect sense. I just saw it and I was like, what the heck?
That's one reason. And that's a common reason in this market. A house goes off the market pending, whatever, maybe it went withdrawn and then came back on. It's likely because they did some improvements to make the house better. That doesn't mean for sure.
Inspection or whatever, and then they decided to go ahead and do those and ask for more.
Yeah. It may or may not be a successful strategy, but that's often what's going on. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just a weird seller that thinks that the market's better than it was the last time they took an offer. They think that they priced it too low the first time. So, I mean, really, that's the other one I was going to say is more often the other one is this. The seller, they put their house on the market for 470, got a whole bunch of offers that came in at above 5, whatever. So now they fell through and they go, well, let's put it back on the market at 5 because clearly that's what my offers were at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd see that kind of scenario. I don't necessarily think that's the best strategy, but it can work depending on the scenario. If they were horribly underpriced, then and 500 was still a good deal, then yeah, great. But if all their offers were 490 to 505 and they priced it at 5, that's not a good strategy, because what got it to that was the multiple offers, not the value of the home. So just as an aside, as you're thinking about listings for yourself, when you're listing a house, just keep that in mind when you're talking to a seller when something like that happens. That, it's like pricing is strategy and psychology. So we got to stay in that window of, if we really were the best, if we got multiple offers at that price point, let's come back on at that price point and let's let's look for multiple offers again. Let's be the best house for the money and drive the price up that way, you know? And if it's truly worth 500, then there's going to be that many more people that are going to hit us back up for that. And in fact, when I follow up with all those other agents to find out if their buyers have found a house yet, I'll be able to tell you whether or not, you know, whether or not it's a good strategy, you know? So, and that's what you should be doing. I know it's not part of this one, but that's something you should be doing is when you have a listing that's coming, looks like it's going to fall apart. First thing I do is call all the good offers I had, or all the people who are the most interested, and say, I'm really working hard to put this deal together. We might be at an impasse on repairs. I try not to say any more than that, other than we might be an impasse on some repairs. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to keep it together. I just wanted to see if your clients are still interested. And if you have like 10 people that are like, we're in at this price, like still, then that gives you a little more power to negotiate. Maybe, you know, you negotiate, push a little harder back and go, hey, I just called all the people that wrote offers and they're all still in. So I'm trying to make this work with you, Mr. Buyer's agent, but you know, the position we have is that we have 10 other agents that have told us, or realistically, we have 2 other agents that have said their buyers are still in. So, you know, what can you do to keep, I mean, we'll keep it together if your clients can keep it together, but if, you know, we don't feel like we need to come down too much more on this, because that's what we got to work with. And then tell your clients, you know, your listing clients, the pros and cons of, you might lose these people and these other 2 people might walk away, and then we're starting all over. And that very well could happen. Are you okay with that? Yeah, we're okay with that. Okay. So anyway, yeah, that's the kind of thing. The good guy, bad guy. I mean, the way I mean, there's all kinds of different ones. One of the ways that I've found that's successful is, it's kind of like a side, how would I say it? Like, it's a little different view of the good guy, bad guy, in a sense, because it's really not good guy, bad guy. It's what I've said earlier, but I'll just say it specifically here. Be in rapport with the agent that you're negotiating with. One tactic is, like, again, or I said in the very beginning, you have a willing buyer, willing seller. We are the 2 people in the middle trying to facilitate a success, right? We are not in an adversarial environment. Okay, we are facilitators. Think of it that way. If you're a facilitator, then you can say, you can buddy up with them in the appropriate way and be friends, and it's like, okay, I'm with you. I totally get it. You've got appointments all afternoon. You know, tell you what, I'll wait to present this till later because I know you can't get back to your client. And, you know, you kind of like start working together, figure it out so that you guys are on the same, you're not on the same team, but you're on the same team in terms of, we're both professionals. We're both trying to figure out how to get the best for our client. You know, like this is what I said to this guy earlier today. I said, first of all, every time I've approached him, because I could do this in these moments. I said, hey, is now a good time? I had a question for you. Like, I don't want to interrupt him. He sounds like the kind of agent that's busy, right? So every time I've reached out to him, I've always been super respectful of his time. You know, is now a good time? Sure, yeah. Or how about half an hour from now? I'm like, okay, great. I was like, oh, I'm in an appointment. Would it work later today? Yeah, it works. So I set the stage that, you know, I don't know this guy from Adam. And then, so I set that stage with this guy. Now we're working together as professionals, right? So he knows that I respect him as a person, as a professional. We're just trying to get information. Hey, I know I told you my clients were going to write this offer, whatever, night before. I had appointments. I couldn't get together with them. They were asking me so many questions that we just couldn't bring it together. I said, but I didn't want you hanging. So I just wanted to let you know that, because I know you're busy. I know you got other things going on. Just let me know if another offer comes in. He's like, okay, great. Thanks for the update. So now I've been respectful to him, right? I've kind of developed this little rapport with him. And then all the whatever conversations, fast forward to the last one we had before he's taking this amended addendum to our offer to his clients. You know, I just, you know, basically I was just like, you know, like, hey, I look forward to working with you. But I also was like, I always say that with people as a positive outcome, you know, like projection, right? I just said, I know you got a lot of appointments this afternoon, so I'm not going to bug you. You know, let me know if you have any questions. I said, I'm teaching a class and I'm in appointments myself. So but I'll do my best to look out for your call. If it does come in and it's urgent, let me know. Otherwise, I'm free after 4, whatever. I told him that. And I just said, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do to make your situation better. If you have any questions for your clients or anything. And now we're two professionals trying to make each other's job easier. Oh, and then he had his kid earlier. That was what I was going to ask you why I brought this story up. He had his kid and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, my kid. I was like, dude, whatever, just call me back whenever it's good for you. So now I'm a human being and he's a human being. We're both professionals and we're now working together. Like, we're not even in a transaction yet, but we're off to a good start. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense? So like, it's the idea of we've now connected, and it's not a good guy, bad guy. It's now we're actually in rapport and connected. So now our ability to negotiate is far easier. That communication channel, if you will, is so much smoother, so much better. It's so much easier to get what we need done, So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but just as keep in mind, that's one of your best tactics is, I don't know if it would say it, befriend the other agent, because I know it's not necessarily, but maybe that's it, but it's just respect and get into rapport with them and understand that they're a person, understand when somebody's got stuff going on, understand when somebody's got their kid and it's like they can't be there, understand when they're showing houses and they really want to get back to you and they can't, understand that stuff. And sometimes you need something sooner, but just understand it. Hey, would it be helpful if I write the addendum and I'll kick it over to your assistant or you or whatever? Oh, actually, that would really help me out. Great. So now we're working together. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I know I kind of beat that one up, but I'll tell you, I said it earlier, that's been one of my best success strategies in this industry. So if we move on to page 20 and talk about positioning, I feel like I've hit on this a ton. The what and whys, affirming the common ground is what I just was talking about. So we're positioning as realtors, my positioning with him and the other realtors I work with is, affirming our common ground as people and as realtors, as professionals. Now we have an opportunity to then confirm what is the common ground we have. Now we've opened that dialogue. We have a clean communication. Now we can talk about what's the commonality for the seller and the buyer and bring that together, right? See how it's valuable. What and why, we've talked about that, how I feel like we've talked about these things. And then, it's interesting that at the last thing, it says there, know when to walk away. It's not your job to walk away. On the one hand, really, it isn't at all, actually. Sometimes you have to be, there are times, I will acknowledge that there are times when it's, even in our real estate transactions, that somebody's hard to work with, maybe even abusive. There's times in your personal relationship where somebody's being abusive and you just have to walk away. They're not communicating, they're not negotiating, they're just not being nice, right? Once in a while, you might run into that with an agent, and you can change the tone of the conversation by using your tone. They are yelling at you. You can acknowledge it with a soft tone. You can bring them down. You can work with them. Try to use those skills, those people skills, to try to get in rapport, but pull them to a healthy position of rapport. But if they're just, I was just actually having a conversation. I don't know, it was like a month ago, maybe more, with a good friend of mine who was an agent who had this guy that was just really frustrating to work with. He's an agent up in Seattle. So, but his brother is buying in town here. And so he's just meddling in this transaction like endlessly. And to the point where the seller of that house said, this realtor from up in Seattle is not allowed on my property ever, as long as I own the property. I will consider trespassing. I will call the police if he sets foot on my property. That's how much he was meddling in this. Everybody hated him, including my friend who's an agent here. And he finally just had a very hard but non-emotional conversation with him and just said, I don't have to listen to you talking that way. When you're willing to be respectful to me, I will listen to you. And then he hung up the phone. And he just said, I'm not going to take it from this guy anymore, but I don't have to get all wrapped up in it. And he just walked away from that guy and just said, and told the other guy, I'm not going to communicate with him if he's going to communicate with me that way. So, ultimately the guy sent him an apology and said, oh, you're right. I'm all like, whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's like, he just walked away from it and said, it's not worth it.
In case anyone needs a training on how to do that, go work at McDonald's for like over a decade. You'll know.
Really?
Because you think that people would get upset about houses, but the amount that they get upset over onions or pickles yeah, I know how to de-escalate like a boss.
Yeah. Well, that's
I did
good.
the
You're gonna
same
rock
thing,
this thing.
Hannah. I did the same thing for 3 years.
Really?
Sucked.
Yeah, well, I did it for 13. So I mean, I know
Wow.
you know too, but yeah, the amount of things people are very emotional about, that kind of thing, it's wild. Like, I get it over a house or something of importance, but
Yeah.
wild.
Well, and even it was Courtney, I think earlier. Yeah, Courtney shared about her, just how wrapped up emotionally she was in her own purchase, right? And how now that she can see it from this side of it, and you know, can basically be empathetic towards that, and she gets it, she knows what that feels like. And so how do you work through that and de-escalate that, and try to set a good expectation and path of success forward, right? That's good. I'm excited for you, Hannah. I think you're going to do great. All this stuff.
Thank you.
It's all the rest of us that we probably need a class from you on it, actually, is what it is.
Yeah, I can call you and like scream at you about a cheeseburger if you want, and we can do script class that way. And you can tell me, ma'am, I'd love to help you, but you're going to need to stop swearing at me.
The first thing we're going to do is have you stop swearing at me, and then I can listen. Use words that are in the dictionary that have meaning, not. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, I think so. If we move through this, I think the next section that's worth touching on is page 22, which is negotiate a counteroffer. Once again, I don't know if you guys, so let me know if you feel like you still feel uncertain about this. I feel like we've covered the position that you're coming from, and how to basically be in a mindset to take on pretty much anything. Hopefully I've talked to you about a lot of this stuff. So hopefully in all the stuff we've talked about, you guys feel equipped to basically take on pretty much anything, especially if you have the opportunity to set the expectation up front and avoid a lot of the challenges that negotiations, will present, because you've already addressed it, what's this one? That's funny. The buyer agent scenario. It's almost like what I just did today. Client makes an offer on a property, and the seller's agent says, "I must warn you that we've gotten several offers. Your offer is pretty low." Like, I mean, do you guys want to go through these, or do you feel comfortable with based on what we've talked about? Do you kind of feel like how you would position yourself, or as a buyer agent, or?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that people especially like when they say like a low offer, okay, well, that's a financially low offer, but it doesn't mean that's an invalid offer or not something that would be beneficial to your client. Like, is it,
Sure.
How do you get people to think about that differently? I don't know. Or do you not?
Yeah. So are you talking about so if you're the buyer agent, you talking about your client that you're representing, or are you talking about what you do with their offer once you've already gone down the path and they've committed to whatever they've given you?
I think that people really outside of the world, and I guess an aha for me too is like, when you think about an offer, you think about how much money am I willing to part with or whatever for an item. But how do you get your clients to understand that there's more than just that piece, and like there's so many other pieces of value that they can offer that don't equate to a dollar amount? I guess that's really all we've been talking about. So
okay, so your question is help them see that
mindset that's like an offer is not just cash. An offer is not just money. It is something more. Yeah,
your best course of action is to address that on the front end with your buyer. You're in your buyer consult. Not that, again, I mean, we've talked about this. The consult doesn't have to be a big sit down, crazy formal meeting, right? I've talked about this with you guys in my presentation on that. It is, the consult is where you are taking the time, whether it's in one sitting, whether it's in the course of a showing, whether it's in the, whatever, to get to know your clients, right? And to help educate them and set expectations. So like I told you guys in that class, that one of that's your reasons for doing it is to educate, share wisdom, and also set expectations and help you then inform you about who they are and what they're all about so that you can represent them well. It's hard to represent somebody well if you don't know what you're working with, right? So in that scenario, your best bet, the answer to your question is the best bet is you've already kind of talked through that. Like if you didn't, it's okay. Because a lot of times maybe you went through all that and then they're like, okay, let's make an offer. And you go, now's a good time to talk about, what is making an offer? An offer is, there's a sale, there's an agreement to purchase. So depending on what level of conversation you're having, maybe they've done it. Maybe you guys filled out an offer, but never really went through it, whatever. But so start with whatever level of the conversation you need to have with them, which is the contract part. But it's like within the contract, there's a bunch of different terms, like things like, when to close, for example, or, what kind of, whether or not we have what our due diligence period is for inspection. So I use the word due diligence because people understand that. Some other contracts around the country actually call it a due diligence period, but ours is an inspection period. But I just use the word, you have a period of time within which to do your due diligence and decide whether or not you want to purchase this house. So that kind of that scenario, right? So you give them the parameters and say, these are the different parameters you have to work with. So one of those, of course, is price. But and for some sellers, it's going to come down to just price. And for other sellers, it's going to come down to what are the most favorable terms, what are some things like, and then you've covered, like we talked about earlier, you tell your buyers, you say like things like, again, you're setting this expectation up front. So now they've already mentally thought through the idea of free rent back, of, whatever, possession after closing in our market, right? You've told them, hey, with, the price range you're looking at in Beaverton is super competitive. So to get these houses, sometimes we have to, I would never like suggest that we give up an inspection. However, we might be in a position where we don't give up the right to do the inspection, but we basically, you can still do the inspection. I would write in that you can still do the inspection, but the sale is not contingent upon the findings of the inspection, because that's what we might have to do to win it. But I typically I haven't had to really do that way in quite a while, because I've been able to negotiate some sort of like a 2-day inspection period, 3-day, whatever, and get an inspector out there the next day somehow. I don't know, whatever, but the point is helping your clients see that there's different aspects of offering that you're going to, like, to your point, helping them see that up front. And then when you address it, when you're writing the offer, talk about the different ways you can offer value. Like I did with these people in this house, I got them to see all the different ways they could give value to the seller, which I was getting from the listing agent, because I started talking to him and I started pulling bits of information out of him every time I talked to him nicely. I wasn't interrogating him. I just said, oh, great. Are they home? Are they home all the time? Or gosh, whatever. Do they need extra time to move out? It's all kind of just off the cuff kind of questions, but I'm always very intentional about getting all the deets out of the listing agent. And, now I know all the stuff that I need to know to work with. Right. So.
Your teenagers didn't stand a chance, did they?
What's that?
Your teenagers didn't stand a chance against you, did they?
No, well, one of them just came in and she was laughing actually at some of the things I just said, because she knows. She laughs. She doesn't like it when I coach her in the morning on the way to school, but I shouldn't say it that way. I think she likes it because we do talk about it. We talk about goals for the day. We talk about things that, and at the end of the day, we talk about, how it went or how they would rate themselves, because it's their goals, not my goals. But we talk about these kinds of things. But you know what? I mean, when you're emotionally in it, like a parent, you don't always succeed the same way. So let's just be real, Let's see. So we got negotiating counter offers. Truly, aside from just trying to talk about all sorts of actual and hypothetical situations, there's all sorts of scenarios. If you guys have a scenario you want to throw out that that would be meaningful to you to hear about, I can certainly speak to that. That's probably, we're really kind of towards the end of class here. So it's kind of,
I have one.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about, how would you write an offer to protect your, let's just say they're a first-time home buyer and they cannot afford appraisal gap. how would you protect them? They want the home, but how would you protect them in the contract? Because they have no money to come up with an appraisal gap, but they
Well,
want to make a strong offer.
yeah, I mean, so first of all, I'm glad you're aware of that, because that is a very real situation, and you want to make sure you talk to your people about that. Really what you're doing is I mean, there's a couple of things here. One is, if you do your homework and you're like, there is no way in creation that this house is going to appraise at the whatever list price or a little over, like, it's not even a question. This house is just way overpriced. You might just be like, hey, you know what, guys, let's put our best foot forward, but you got to know that we may not be able to get this one. We're up against, and this is where I would call the listing agent, say, my people are, they're willing to even put in a strong offer. They're willing to even pay, like, if it was appropriate, I would say, where are we at? Are we like I always say this, are we way over list? And they're like, no, we're not way over list. Like, I always say, I know you can't tell me. I know that. I'm just trying to get a sense of, if I came in at list, is that even worth me writing? So like, I'll say stuff like that. And a good listing is just like, yeah, don't even bother, because we've already gone above that. Right. So now you're getting some information out of them. So now depending on how well you've gotten them talking, you might be able to eke out a little bit more information, through that now you've got a little rapport going. It's like, here's a good way to have rapport with a listing agent who's busy, is say, I don't want to waste your time. Right. I don't want to give you another offer that you have to like present. So I'm trying to figure out if I should even bother writing this for these clients. So where do we, like, give me a ballpark of where we need to be? And you'd be surprised. I would say probably 3/4 of the time I get an answer that gives me something to work with on that, maybe even more often than that, actually. If you do it in the right way, or like like you say what I said a second ago, you go, I know you can't give me the exact number. I'm just trying to, are we talking like 50,000 over list, or we talk whatever the price range is, and then just get a sense for it. And then they go, oh yeah, well, not quite that high, Oh, so like if we came in like 20,000 over list, that would at least be worth the conversation. I'll say it like that. And they go, you might be in the conversation. Okay, good enough. That's like all I need. Now I know about where we are. And then I can say, well, my clients, well, in this case, you would just go back to your clients and say, we're like 20, 30,000 over list. You guys, here's what we can do. We can write it at that, but we can't write an appraisal gap. So they may counter us and want that. They may not. If you guys want, I'll write the offer at that. And you don't have to write an appraisal gap, because there's already appraisal contingency in there. Right. If you can't do the gap, you just leave it at that and the deal falls apart. And you hope for the best, and then you present on all the other terms, try to make it appealing on every other aspect, and then cross your fingers they accept your offer, and cross your fingers that an appraiser is favorable, and then also spend some time being in rapport with the agent and the sellers at that point, so that when you get to the point where it comes in $3,000 short, they are emotionally married to the idea of you guys getting the house by that point. Like the sellers are like, they want you to have the house by this point. So they're willing to just figure it out,
Yeah. Perfect. All right,
and I'm not saying you should do this yet. It's another tool. You might say, if the deal truly gets to the point, don't offer this up front. But if the deal's like, well, it's done, let's just terminate. And the seller doesn't want to come down 3,000. And like, you're like, really, for $3,000, and then when it comes down to everything, you've just exhausted everything. Then you might go like, I'll tell you, like I can say this because I say this honestly, like I almost never do this basically, but this seems crazy that we've come this far. We're fine. We got through inspections, everything. Like maybe you and I could split the difference on this. I mean, it's enough. There's enough commission in there that, you and I could split it, and your seller is netting what they need to net, and, we can make it work. How do you feel about that? Just ask the agent and see what they say. And they might say like, oh, I never do that. It's like totally fine. Like I totally get it, and maybe you might say, I'll take it. I'll take the hit up for that, because I want this deal done. I mean, I've already put the time in, it's a sunk cost at that point. So, you feel this is like your sister-in-law, and you really want them to have the house, and you're just at this point, it's just better to get it done better to help serve your client and get the deal done than it is to worry about whether you made a few $1,000s more on it,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But don't offer that up front.
I was going to say, I wouldn't offer that up front. That'd be
That's like a last, not very
resort.
last, on the way out the door.
Yeah.
You know,
When
what can
all
we do to
else
keep this
fails,
together?
resort. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What else? What are some other scenarios you guys have run into or perceive that you might run into that you would like some, you know, guidance on? Nothing. You guys you got it all. You're like pros now. You feel confident. I just gave you all you need to know, and you're just like, I got this. I'm just gonna kill it. I know what I need to do every day now.
They
No,
definitely
it
feel
just
more
made me
comfortable,
more scared.
more confident.
Good. You're more confident. Well, hopefully, like I said in the beginning, I mean, hopefully you feel more confident. Hopefully, like I like to, I mean, my desire is to try to have a class where we can, you know, talk about things a lot more. Sometimes this topic, it's a matter of just giving it to you and giving it to you and giving it to you, and hopefully you can stop me and ask questions if you're confused. But sometimes it's just like, here's the lay of the land and here's what it is, and now that you have these tools, you can go forth and be amazing, right? I mean, that's the goal.
For sure.
Obviously, you're gonna run into situations along the way where you're gonna be like, oh, how does that work? You know, what did he say about that? You know, that's normal. I have it too, where there's times I you know, in the middle of it, I'm like, what is that? I forgot. I was to touch on something you said a minute ago. My son, who's 11, I was having a parenting moment where I was super frustrated with him, and my brain could not go back and recall the parenting like solutions to like deal with him being the way he was being. And I was like, I was getting frustrated. I was getting into it emotionally, and I was like, dang it, I can't. I'm like, where did I know I have that tool, and I just in the moment I couldn't find it in my head, you know. And so I was like trying to think, who can I call? Who can I, you know, like I need somebody to get me out of my head, and I need to try to remember what is the tactic I need to do to negotiate with him again on that, you know. And so you know, I just called somebody that helped me kind of get out of my head and find, and I was like, oh, that's right. I totally, like, I just needed that help. So don't be afraid to, you know, reach out when you're in the midst of a challenge or frustration, and, you know, get help from one of us. And, you know, it's what we're all here to help, and you guys can help each other too. I mean, if, you know, that's one of the great things about, you know, our company is that our desire, our culture is we all can help each other achieve more. I mean, together we achieve more. You know, real estate is, by sort of its nature, is you're on your own, good luck. You know, it's every man for himself. Like, I grew up in an office, starting up in an office where it felt like every man for himself. You know, it's like, don't look at what I'm doing. Don't look at what I'm doing. You know, that was the environment I was in. And it was like, I'm not wired that way. So clearly, as you probably have figured out. So it just was like, I got to get out of this place. This is not, I'm like, hey, what works for you? Here's what works for me. That's how, you know, how I'm wired, you know? So I love it. I love it in this environment. That's what I got for you. I certainly want to respect your time and let you guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon, if that's what you want. And you've got me for another whatever. If you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just
You're the
holler.
best.
You want
Thanks for
voicemail tips
everything.
as a group? I can
great.
certainly do that.
Yeah, I was gonna just suggest that since I got you.
Yeah, I mean, any of you guys think about it. So like, there's not one answer, right? I'm just going to say that on the front end. There's not like one way. Yeah, think about this. When you call, like, if you call somebody and you're not sure, if you call, like, let's say you were going to call, I don't know, like a repair shop or something and you're like, let's say you're going to call, like, your buddy said, hey, he's got to repair his iPhones or phones. And you're like, if my phone's broken, I really need it fixed. And you call the shop and it's just like, you have reached 5033. Are you like going to leave a message, or like you're going to be like, hi, my name's Hannah. I don't know if I got the right number, you know, like, right. I mean, that's where you're emotionally at. Right. So if you think of it, if you reverse engineer it, you don't want people to call you and feel that way, obviously. Right. So how do we leave a message that is at least like reflective of who you are and welcoming, and put somebody in a frame of mind that they feel confident that the person that they called, they know like they got the person that they were intending to call, and that they feel comfortable leaving a message, right? They feel welcome to leave a message, right? So what exact words you use, I think think about yourself, like, and how you might communicate. So you don't need to come across as like, if you're naturally like just friendly and talkative, you don't need to say, hello, yes, this is Hannah and you have reached, or whatever. Just be friendly. Just like, hey, this is Hannah, whatever. If you're not, I'll just give you two kind of examples. If you're trying to bridge the whole real estate, and I don't want to necessarily say I'm a realtor kind of scenario, totally fine. But just be like, you could, in your own words, if it was me, like not being too formal, I'd just say, it's like, hi, this is Eric. I just use my first name. Just say, hi, this is Eric. I wish I could take your call right now. I'm busy, or whatever, some version of, please leave a message. I really want to hear from you. Some like, it's important to me, or whatever, like whatever your language for that would be. Please leave me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Some kind of light message for real estate, and say, hey, this is Eric Yorga with Keller Williams. Your call is important to me. I would, what is I don't even know what mine says now. I've gone back and forth on some different versions of what I would say, like, but please do leave me a message and I'll get back to you at my first opportunity. Or you can hit me up online at ericyorga.com, or some people go that route too. But yeah.
How do you feel about the some realtors leave, if you want to get in touch with me faster, text me?
If you're truly in that scenario, so I think it's, when I hear that, if it's communicated in a way that I feel like they're serving me by telling me that, like they're helping, like, hey, this, like, if I was to say it for myself, I would say, how would I say it? Let's see here. Let's say, hi, you reached Eric, like your call is, hi, this is Eric Yorga, Keller Williams Realty. Your call is important to me. I am often in meetings back to back, yet I do want to hear from you. So if it's urgent, please shoot me a text or something. Otherwise, just leave me a message and I'll do my best to check my messages before the end of the day. Thanks. Have a great day.
Right.
Like, so I'm trying to like, just be nice about it and say, hey, if it's urgent. And I've told my coaching people here, email me and then text me if it's urgent, because I'm not sitting on my email all day intentionally. Right. So I don't say it, like, I don't communicate that to them in a way that sounds like I'm pushing them off, but I communicate in a way that I want to be available if it's urgent. And I'm setting the expectation that if it's not urgent, that I will check my email throughout the day and I will get back to you. Right. So, I feel like the way I've tried to communicate it, I feel like I'm being nice about it, and I'm letting them know that that you're important to me. So,
Okay.
Does that make sense? And it's got to fit you. Like, if you're just trying to avoid.
I mean, I'd love for people to text me if it's that urgent. Or it doesn't have to be urgent, but for me, it just doesn't seem very professional to ask somebody to text you in a voicemail. But that's just me trying to get over some things. But
well, truly, part of it is if that's how you want to run your business. Yeah. There's no right or wrong on this.
Right.
Like, truly, like if you feel like it's not reflective of you to say that, then don't say that. Like, be like, hey, so here's, some people say, like, it's my commitment to check my voicemails throughout the day, so please leave me a message and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible, or something. Right. If that's who you are, then do that. Be that. Don't say anything about texting.
Yeah.
For me, the texting actually is a thing, and I like, it's helpful for me, and it's not how I want to communicate with everybody all the time. So
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. It's like, so I try to just be like, please send me an email. If you have my email, send me an email. Please leave a message. I'd love to hear from you. I probably should update mine, honestly, now that I'm talking about it, and just be like, but just find that thing. If you're in real estate, I think, do we have to? I don't know if we have to, but at the very least, have your name, people. At the very least. I mean, if you're in this business and your thing, it does not have your name on it, then I don't know what's going on.
Good point.
Right? You're basically telling people, I don't want to hear from you. Do you want me to call everybody's number and tell you? We could do that live, and I don't want to be critical, but if anybody wants, not sure, just hit me up. I put my information in the chat. We can always have a little like one-on-one mastermind about it. You can listen to mine, I'll listen to yours, to see what tips we have for each other, and call it good. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Open floor, open questions. Anything you got?
Bye.
Best practices for how to wear long pants in the winter? I don't know. I don't know the answer for that, but
No, but you should wear some sunscreen when you're like snowboarding or whatever you were doing. Your
oh,
whole
I
face
know.
is burnt.
Did you look at my stuff? Yeah.
No, I just remember Mara like saying that you were like an outdoor person, and I was like looking at your face this whole time, and I'm like, why does it look like you have like white spots around his eyes? And I was like, oh, goggles.
Well, yeah, I probably have. It's worse, and it's because I have a light on over here, and I had a ring light on earlier, but the
Oh.
sun was out, so I turned it off. But yeah, you will see me in a few months. You're going to see a little more goggle marks. Yes, that's
Yeah,
guilty.
You can always generally tell the snow people.
Yeah. If you go back through my Facebook stuff, you'll see that. My son, I feel bad though, because I forget sometimes with him, and then he gets the super like a little bit of rosy sunburn on his face, and then I'm like, probably should have put some sunscreen on him.
That's great. Well, thank you. I'll see you next time, hopefully.
Absolutely. Yeah, here for you guys. Happy to help. Anybody has anything, you got me. If not, you can totally bail too. Happy to answer questions on anything you got. All right. See you guys. Peace out, as they say, as my kids would say.